Winston Churchill wasn't just a wartime leader. He lived one of the most extraordinary and unexpected lives in history. He escaped a prison camp, helped invent the tank, and even investigated UFOs. Stay until the end, because the final fact will completely change how you see him. Number 20. Churchill's Great Escape. Before he was Britain's most famous prime minister, Churchill was a prisoner of war. In 1899, during the Boer War, he was captured and sent to a high-security prison camp in South Africa. But Churchill wasn't the type to sit around and wait. One night, he scaled a wall, dodged armed guards, and disappeared into enemy territory. He had no weapons, no map, and barely any supplies, just a few biscuits in his pocket. Over the next several days, he traveled nearly 300 miles on foot and by train, hiding in coal mines and sneaking past enemy patrols. By the time he reached safety, Churchill had become a national hero, and his political career was suddenly on the fast track. Number 19. Churchill. Won a Nobel Prize for writing. Most people know Churchill as a politician, but he was also an award-winning writer. Over his lifetime, he wrote over 40 books, including biographies, historical accounts, and even a novel. His most famous work was The Second World War, a 6-volume series detailing the war from his perspective. His writing was so well respected that in 1953 he won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Churchill is one of the very few world leaders to receive a Nobel Prize outside of politics, proving that his influence went far beyond the battlefield. Number 18. Churchill had a speech impediment. Despite being one of history's most famous orators, Churchill struggled with a speech impediment. He had trouble pronouncing certain words, particularly those with the letter S, which some believe was a form of a lisp. Instead of letting it hold him back, he trained for years to improve his delivery. He practiced dramatic pauses, carefully crafted his speeches, and used his natural charisma to command attention. By the time World War II arrived, his speeches were so powerful that they helped rally an entire nation. Churchill's ability to turn a weakness into one of his greatest strengths is part of what made him a legendary leader. Number 17. Churchill loved painting. Few people know that Churchill was an accomplished painter. He picked up the hobby in his 40s and became so skilled that his work was displayed in art galleries. Over his lifetime, he painted over 500 pieces, mostly landscapes and still-life portraits. Painting wasn't just a pastime for Churchill, it was an escape. He often turned to it during moments of stress and depression, calling it one of the greatest comforts in his life. He once said, "When I get to heaven, I mean to spend a considerable portion of my first million years painting." Number 16. He was almost killed by a car in New York in 1931. Churchill nearly died in a traffic accident while visiting New York City. He was used to British roads, where cars drive on the left, and when he crossed Fifth Avenue, he looked the wrong way, straight into oncoming traffic. A car hit him hard, sending him crashing to the pavement. He suffered serious injuries, including a head wound and broken ribs. But in true Churchill fashion, he recovered quickly, and even found a way to benefit from the accident. Since Prohibition was still in effect, alcohol was illegal in the U.S. at the time. But Churchill's doctor wrote him a medical prescription for unlimited alcohol, allowing him to legally drink as much as he wanted while he healed. Number 15. Churchill's love for whiskey and champagne. Churchill wasn't just a casual drinker. He was legendary for his love of alcohol. His daily routine included whiskey with a splash of water in the morning, champagne with lunch and dinner, and brandy to end the night. His favorite? Paul Roger Champagne. He drank it so often that the company later named a special edition after him. He once said, "I could not live without champagne. In victory, I deserve it. In defeat, I need it." Even during World War II, Churchill made sure his personal stock never ran out, proving that no matter how serious the situation, he always had time for a drink. Number 14. Churchill wanted a United States of Europe. Decades before the European Union existed, Churchill pushed for a united Europe. In a famous 1946 speech, he urged European nations to come together to prevent future wars, declaring, "We must build a kind of United States of Europe." He believed that if European countries worked together, another world war could be avoided. Although Britain never fully embraced the idea, Churchill's vision laid the groundwork for modern European diplomacy. Number 13. Churchill struggled with depression. behind his strong public image, Churchill battled severe depression, which he called his black dog. He experienced extreme mood swings and often retreated into painting and writing to cope. Despite these struggles, he remained highly productive, leading Britain through its darkest hours. His openness about mental health was rare for his time, and today, many view him as an example of how even the strongest leaders can face personal challenges. Number 12. Churchill was a trained bricklayer. Churchill wasn't afraid of hard work. He was a certified bricklayer and even became an official member of the Bricklayers' Union. At his countryside home, Chartwell, he personally built walls, garden structures, and even a small cottage by hand. He once said that bricklaying gave him the same satisfaction as writing or painting. It was a way to create something lasting. Few world leaders have ever taken up bricklaying as a hobby, but for Churchill, it was just another way to challenge himself. Number 11. Churchill helped develop the tank during World War I. Churchill saw that trench warfare was leading to mass casualties and stalemates. To break the deadlock, he championed the development of a new kind of armored vehicle, the tank. As First Lord of the Admiralty, he pushed military engineers to design an armored track-driven machine that could cross rough terrain and withstand enemy fire. The first tanks were slow and unreliable, but they paved the way for the future of modern warfare. Without Churchill's early support, tanks might not have been developed in time for World War II, where they became one of the most decisive weapons of the war. Number 10. He was voted out of office, twice. Churchill is remembered as the leader who led Britain to victory in World War II, but just months after the war ended in 1945, he was voted out of office. Many believed Britain needed a leader focused on rebuilding rather than war, and Churchill's party lost in a landslide. But Churchill wasn't finished. In 1951, he ran again and won, becoming Prime Minister for a second time. Despite this, his second term was cut short when he was forced to step down due to health issues. Even the greatest leaders face setbacks, but Churchill always found a way to come back. Number 9. Churchill had a soft spot for animals. For all his toughness, Churchill had a deep love for animals. His bulldog, Rufus, was his constant companion, and Churchill once refused to let him watch Oliver Twist because it was too sad. He was also passionate about horses and continued riding well into his 70s. Even during World War II, Churchill made time to visit racehorses and enjoyed watching them train. His love for animals showed a softer side to a man best known for his leadership during war. Number 8. Churchill pioneered air defense. Before World War II, decades before World War II, Churchill saw that air power would change the future of warfare. As early as 1914, he pushed for Britain to develop anti-air defenses and played a key role in forming what would later become the Royal Air Force, RAF. His early investments in air defense proved critical in 1940, when the RAF defended Britain against the German Luftwaffe during the Battle of Britain. Without Churchill's foresight, Britain might not have been able to withstand Hitler's air assault. Number 7. Churchill approved a plan to use exploding rats. During World War II, British spies developed one of the strangest sabotage tactics ever imagined: exploding rats. The plan was to smuggle dead rats packed with explosives into German factories and wait for enemy soldiers to dispose of them in furnaces. The hope was that the explosions would destroy key facilities and spread fear throughout the German ranks. The plan was discovered before it could be fully executed, but just the fact that it was considered shows how far Churchill and his war planners were willing to go to defeat the Nazis. Number 6. Churchill ordered a secret investigation into UFOs. Churchill wasn't just focused on threats from Earth. He also took unidentified flying objects seriously. In 1952, he ordered British intelligence to investigate UFO sightings and determine whether they posed a national security risk. Some historians believe that Churchill even suppressed certain findings to prevent public panic. While he never publicly spoke about extraterrestrial life, his willingness to investigate the unknown proves that Churchill always thought ahead, even beyond this planet. Number 5. Churchill had an American mother. Churchill's larger-than-life personality may have come from his mixed heritage. His mother, Jenny Jerome, was an American socialite from New York, making Churchill half American. Because of this, he had a deep admiration for the United States and built strong ties between Britain and America during World War II. In 1963, years after his retirement, he was granted honorary U.S. citizenship, one of the very few people in history to receive this honor. Churchill often referred to the U.S. and Britain as two nations separated by a common language. But his dual identity helped strengthen their alliance at a critical moment in history. Number 4. Churchill almost didn't become Prime Minister. When Neville Chamberlain resigned as Prime Minister in 1940, Churchill was not the obvious choice to replace him. Many in Parliament preferred Lord Halifax, a high-ranking conservative politician who was open to negotiating with Nazi Germany. But Churchill refused to consider surrender or compromise, arguing that Britain had to fight to the very end. His determination and powerful speeches convinced the government that he was the only leader capable of rallying the country. Had history taken a different turn, Britain might have made a peace deal with Hitler, and the entire course of World War II could have changed. Number 3. Churchill considered using anthrax bombs. Churchill was willing to do whatever it took to defeat Nazi Germany, including considering biological warfare. During World War II, British scientists developed a plan to drop anthrax-laced cattle feed over German farmland. The goal was to poison livestock and cause mass food shortages, crippling Germany's war efforts. The plan was never carried out, but after the war, testing on anthrax bombs left parts of Scotland contaminated for decades. Churchill's willingness to use such extreme measures showed just how far he was prepared to go to win the war. Number 2. Churchill pushed for Britain to build nuclear weapons. After World War II, Churchill understood that nuclear weapons would shape the future of warfare. He believed Britain needed its own atomic bomb to remain a global power and not fall behind the United States and Soviet Union. Thanks to his efforts, Britain successfully tested its first nuclear bomb in 1952, making it the third country in the world to develop nuclear weapons. Churchill's push for nuclear capability shaped Britain's defense policy for decades and cemented its role as a major world power during the Cold War. Number 1. Churchill predicted the Cold War before it began. One of Churchill's most famous speeches wasn't during World War II, it was after the war had ended. In 1946, during a speech in the United States, Churchill warned that the Soviet Union was expanding its influence across Eastern Europe and that a divide between East and West was forming. He called this divide the Iron Curtain, a phrase that would define the Cold War for decades. At the time, his speech was controversial, but history proved him right. Churchill saw the rise of Soviet power before most Western leaders, once again proving that he was always thinking several steps ahead. Winston Churchill's life was full of surprises, from his daring escapes to his groundbreaking political foresight. He wasn't just a wartime leader, he was an artist, a writer, a strategist, and a visionary. If you enjoyed learning these hidden facts about Churchill, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating figures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time with more incredible stories from the past.